Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello. This video is going to help you on creating the perfect research paper for your class. So I'm going to show you the parts of a research paper and give you some details on how you can create the perfect research paper. So the first thing you have to do is go to the parts of a research paper and scoring rubric on Blackboard. So we begin here with the title. And the title is worth 5 points. And make sure that the title is pretty well clear and more than just one sentence. All right? I'm sorry, more than one word. So these are examples here. That's great. Now, more interesting is the abstract. So I'll go to this sheet here, and the abstract is a section that should be done at the final part of your paper, and is considered a teaser for your paper. So when you look at the explanation here, you give us the goals, objectives, results, and conclusions. It's about 100 to 500 words. You don't have to put 100 words. If you're writing this paper for a master's level, then you have to do a much more detailed abstract. If you were doing it for a PhD, obviously it gets more and more detailed. But for a basic 100 level class, then you're all set with just giving a few sentences on the abstract. The next section is 20 points, and that's the introduction. So let's look at the introduction here in a little bit more detail. This is where you state your thesis. You define the problem. And this is where you show supporting research to demonstrate that your topic and thesis are relevant. So you're going to find some scholarly and peer-reviewed research that's not more than 5 years old from the current date. You can use older sources, such as for historical purposes, and to describe your topic. That's okay. But when you're giving us details and facts about the topic, then you must use things that are sources that are less than 5 years. Let me give you an example. If you go on to data about crime statistics, if you're using statistics from the 1980s or 90s, then you know they're not relevant. But if you're using statistics from the last 5 years, then they are. Okay, now give me a little, show you a little section on here that you can find. This is called usafacts.org. It was developed by Steve Ballmer, who was one of the primary people in Microsoft. He also owns a basketball team in Los Angeles, the one that's not called the Lakers. So there are plenty and plenty of information here that may get you started towards a paper. So I suggest that you look up usafacts.org. You can see right here, and you can find a lot of information about the population, the metrics, and let's just go on and look at a couple of them. Establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, and you can see some very visual displays as well. And you can see throughout the years what this one is. The government creates police forces, operates, and so on. You can read this on your own, and it's going to show you that the total spending has risen since 1980. And just by putting your arrow on and your cursor on the graph, you can see the different years and how much it's grown up to 2015. So that's just one example there. There are some reports as well, and the reports you can find may give you some ideas for data and if for some ideas for paper as well. And you can see that the graphs are very colorful, which you will have to put in your paper as well. So let's go back to the parts of a research paper. And this is the methods and procedure. So this is what you're going to do is tell us what you did, how you did, and give us the strategies. So let me just show you in a more simplified form the next section on methods and procedures. You're going to tell the reader where you got your data. Okay, and remember data is plural. So make sure you write that correctly in your paper. How you analyze the data and how you will present it in the next section, which is the results. Are you making a chart? Are you making a graph? Are you making a stem plot table? How are you going to show us your data? It's in the results section. So this is where you say, I found my data through the Census Bureau, or I found my data through USA Facts. That would be a source as well. Or I found it from the Pew Research Center. So there are plenty of types of places to find facts. You can also say that you did a literature search and found the topic in many literature sources. That's fine as well. For that section, here you go, in the results, in the methods and procedures section is where you tell us where you got your data and what you're going to do with it. Are you going to make a correlation graph? Are you going to look at two variables and see if one correlates to the other? And remember, correlation does not mean causation. So that's a section that you're going to be talking about, and it's going to be worth 10 points. Right there, 10 points. Okay, the next section following that is now where you're going to tell us, you're going to show us your results, and you're going to give graphs and tables. And if you recall from the from all of your stats classes or any of your other types of classes and research, you talk about how do you present your graphs and how do you going to show us your data. So let's go down to the next section here, and this is going to be a let me see where you can get here. This is where you show your analyses of the data. Make sure you explain the charts and graphs. You can use graphs and data from another source, but make sure you cite the source. You can't just copy and paste and say where you got it and did it on your own. So if, say, you found a nice little graph on this particular page, and let's find something that looks kind of pretty here. Let's see if I can just, that wouldn't be that great. But let me try and find something else here. Spending. That sounds interesting. So any graphs on spending here? And well, actually, there's a chart. That would be something that you could copy, but you have to you have to cite the source. However, it would be more interesting if you created your own chart and graph for the paper. You can use a pie chart like this. Make sure the percentages are on the pie chart. Use a bar graph. Again, correlation is a great thing to compare two variables. And in correlation, be aware that your data has to be continuous. So that's the results section. Now going back to parts of research, now this is your ta-da moment, your conclusion. This is discussion. That's worth 20 points. In the conclusion, this is what you're going to do. You're going to look at your thesis, and you're going to look at your introduction, and you're going to compare your results to these. Did the results support your thesis? Remember, you don't say proven. We're not at that level. But does your all of your data do they support your contention about the paper and so on? So this is a very important section, and I'm going to go back to the introduction. And in the introduction, this is where you stated your case. And this is where you put down your search for scholarly and peer-reviewed articles that supports your thesis. You're not just making this up on your own. You're actually using something that has a basis, that has gravitas, that has meaning. So you find the resources that support. So this is where you cite a lot of your supporting research. And then you go to your conclusion section, and then you see my in my introduction, I said this, so on and so forth. Okay? So this is you're going to show us how smart you are and how much you learned from your research. You can make a judgment based on all these facts. So that's worth 20 points as well. Then the final section is worth 15 points, and that's where you cite your references. This is all done in APA format, and so you can go to Purdue OWL. That's a great source there, or you can find any of the source online. The APA it does change a bit sometimes during the course of a few years, but it's always good to get a very up-to-date source. If you have an old book, that may be out of date in no time at all. So make sure it's in APA format. Just give you a hint that this is a problem I see in many papers when you do write your sources, that the first line is not indented, but all the succeeding lines are indented. Okay, so that's what is going to be on the references section. So going back to the sheet, one couple final thing, always pass it on a due date, use APA format, and make sure you'll use 12-point type Roman font, and formal style. What I mean by formal style is that it's written in the third person. It's written in declarative sentences, in active, in the active voice, not passive voice. And it's also written as I'm speaking in a passive voice. It's also written without any subjective adjectives. Okay, so you do not put your judgment in the paper, And even in the final section in your conclusion where you've made your judgment, you write it in a scholarly manner. So that's what the whole idea of the paper is. There are other videos showing the actual way to write the paper in terms of the style, and that's also on Blackboard. So I hope you don't feel like this little fella here, but I hope that you have a great time writing your research paper. And by the way, pick a topic that you will not fall out of love with, as I end the sentence with a preposition, which is another point off. Take care.